found my resignation letter 3 weeks after I disappeared from the Stanley Hotel. It was still sitting on the front desk, unsigned, the pen lying across it like I'd been interrupted mid-sentence. My coffee cup was there too, still half full, room temperature, a thin film of mold floating on top. The security footage from that night shows me walking toward the basement stairs at 3:47 a.m. You can see me hesitate at the door, see me look back over my shoulder like I knew I shouldn't go down there. What the footage doesn't show is me coming back up. I wasn't supposed to be working the graveyard shift. The guy who usually covered it, David Ortiz, had quit without notice, just walked out during his break on a Tuesday night and never came back. Didn't answer his phone, didn't pick up his final paycheck. His apartment was cleared out within 48 hours. The hotel manager, Patricia Brennan, was desperate. She offered me an extra $3 an hour and guaranteed weekends off. I was 26, drowning in student loans and stupid enough to think a haunted hotel was just good marketing. "It's mostly paperwork," Patricia said, walking me through the lobby on my first night. Her heels clicked against the marble floor, echoing in the vast emptiness. "Guest check-ins stop around 11. After that, you're really just here in case of emergencies. Answer the phone if it rings, do a security walk every 2 hours. The rest of the time you can study, read, whatever." The Stanley Hotel sits on a hill overlooking Estes Park, a mat in the corner, roped off so guests couldn't touch it. A small plaque explained that Flora had been a talented pianist and had often performed for guests. Some people claimed you could still hear her playing late at night. I stood in the doorway, listening. Nothing. Just old wood settling in the wind outside. I checked the lock on the window, signed my log, and headed back toward the lobby. That's when I heard it. A single piano note. Clear, distinct, middle C. I froze in the hallway. It had come from behind me, from the music room. I waited, my heart suddenly hammering in my chest. Nothing else, just that one note hanging in the air like a question. I walked back to the music room doorway and looked inside. Empty. The piano sat in the corner. I'd heard the stories before. Everyone who worked here had, but I'd never paid much attention. The Stanley Hotel was built by Freeland Oscar Stanley, inventor of the Stanley Steamer automobile. He and his wife Flora moved to Colorado for his health, tuberculosis. The dry mountain air was supposed to help. They built the hotel in 1909. It became famous as a resort for wealthy travelers. Flora died in 1939, Freeland in 1940. People claimed their ghosts still wandered the hotel, Flora in the music room playing her piano, Freeland in the lobby and billiard room greeting guests who couldn't see him. Harmless hauntings, friendly ghosts, but there were other stories, darker ones. In 1911, a chambermaid named Elizabeth Wilson had been struck by lightning while working in room 217 during a storm. She'd survived, barely, but had never been the same. She'd continued working at the hotel until her death in 1950, but staff and guests reported strange encounters, furniture rearranged, luggage unpacked, the feeling of being watched while sleeping. Elizabeth's ghost supposedly still tended to room 217, but the story said she was benevolent, helpful even. The woman I'd seen hadn't felt benevolent. I kept reading. There were other deaths over the years. A construction worker who'd fallen from the roof during renovations in 1983. A guest who died of a heart attack in the McGregor Ballroom during a New Year's Eve party. A young couple who'd driven off the mountain road outside the hotel in 1967. Some people said they were running from something in the hotel, though that was never confirmed. And then I found something that made my blood run cold. A newspaper article from 1984, a small item, barely a paragraph. Night manager missing from Stanley Hotel. Estes Park, Colorado. Police are searching for James Whitmore, 34, night manager at the historic Stanley Hotel, who disappeared from his post during his shift on October 3rd. Security footage shows Whitmore entering the basement level at approximately 3:45 a.m. He has not been seen since. The temperature dropped with every step. By the time I reached the bottom, my breath was forming clouds of vapor. The basement was a labyrinth. Narrow hallways branched off in multiple directions, lined with pipes and electrical conduit. Old furniture sat stacked against the walls, chairs with broken legs, headboards, mattresses covered in stains. Everything was covered in a thick layer of dust, except for the floor. The floor was clean, recently swept, and there were footprints in the thin layer of dust that remained. Bare footprints, small, a child's. They led deeper into the basement. "Don't follow them," that voice said again. But something was drawing me forward, some horrible curiosity, or maybe something else. Maybe I wasn't in control anymore. I followed the footprints. The hallway opened into a large room filled with the hotel's old mechanical systems, boilers, water heaters, the circuit breaker panel mounted on the far wall. And in the center of the room, written on the concrete floor in what looked like chalk, "He's in the walls." The same words the woman had spoken on the phone. I walked closer, my light illuminating the message. Not chalk, bone dust, ground so fine it looked like powder, but when I bent down, I could see tiny fragments, teeth, pieces of skull. I stumbled backward, my stomach lurching, and then I heard it. Scratching, coming from inside the walls. Not rats, not pipes. This was deliberate, rhythmic, like nails dragging across concrete. Scratch, 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 moving along the wall to my right, slow, methodical. I turned my flashlight toward the sound. The wall looked normal, old brick and mortar, but the scratching was definitely coming from inside it. And then I saw it. A section of the wall, about 3 feet up from the floor, was different. Newer mortar, cleaner bricks, like it had been repaired recently. The scratching was coming behind that section. "He's in the walls." Oh God, someone was sealed inside the wall. I ran to the circuit breaker, my hands shaking so badly I could barely flip the switches. Main power, emergency lights, everything. Nothing happened. The power was completely dead. Behind me, the scratching grew louder, more frantic, and then it stopped. Silence. I turned around slowly. The wall was cracking, small fissures spreading across the newer section of underwater. I was completely cut off. 5:27 a.m. The footsteps were in the lobby now. I could see his shadow through the gap under the door, standing just outside, waiting. The doorknob began to turn. I'd locked it. I'd pushed furniture against it, but it was turning anyway, the metal grinding. "I didn't do anything," I shouted. "I'm not Thomas. My name is Marcus, Marcus Webb." The doorknob stopped turning. Silence. And then a voice, deep, cultured, with a slight New England accent. "You went to the basement." "I was just checking the power." "You saw him." "I didn't mean to. I didn't know." "You can't tell anyone. No one can know what happened to Thomas. It would ruin everything. The hotel's reputation, Flora's reputation." "I won't tell anyone, I swear." "That's what James said. That's what David said. They lied." The door began to shake. The furniture I'd piled against it started to slide. "Please," I was crying now, backing away. "Please, I have a family. I have—" So did Thomas. The door exploded inward. He stood in the doorway, Freelan Oscar Stanley, or what was left of him, translucent, flickering. His face was kind, grandfatherly even, but his eyes were empty, dead, lost. He looked at me with something like pity. "It's nothing personal, son, but I can't let you leave, can't let you talk." He stepped into the office. The temperature plummeted. My breath came out in white clouds. Frost formed on the windows, spreading in crystalline patterns. I backed up until I hit the wall. Nowhere left to run. Freelan raised his hand. And then, from somewhere in the hotel, a piano began to play. The sound stopped him. A classical piece, Mozart, I think, played beautifully, each note clear and precise. Freelan's expression changed, softened. "Flora?" he whispered. The piano continued playing. He turned away from me, toward the lobby, toward the music room. "Flora, is that you?" He walked out of the office, gliding across the marble floor, drawn toward the sound. I didn't hesitate. I ran, out of the office, away from the music room, toward the front doors. They were unlocked. I burst through them into the cold pre-dawn air, stumbling down the front steps, my legs nearly giving out. Behind me, the piano music stopped. I heard a roar of rage from inside the hotel, a sound like a storm, like breaking glass and splintering wood. But I was outside. The sky to the east was starting to lighten. Not quite sunrise, but close. Dawn was coming. I ran to my car in the parking lot, fumbled with my keys, got the door open. The hotel's front door slammed open. Freelan stood in the entrance, silhouetted against the light from the lobby. He took one step out onto the porch. And then the sun broke over the mountain. The first ray of golden light hit his face. He screamed, a sound of pure anguish, and dissolved into smoke. Gone. I sat in my car, shaking, watching the hotel in my rear-view mirror as I drove away. I called Patricia from a gas station 20 miles away, told her I quit, told her she could mail my final check, didn't tell her why. She didn't sound surprised. "Did you go to the 4th floor?" she asked quietly. "Yes." "Did you see him?" "Yes." A long pause. Then, "I'm sorry, Marcus. I should have been more clear. I should have told you everything." "You knew." "We all know. Everyone who's worked the night shift. We can't talk about it. Who would believe us? David Ortiz, James Whitmore, how many others?" "I don't know," she said, and she sounded tired, so tired. The hotel keeps its secrets, always has. I hung up. That was September 2011. I never went back to the Stanley Hotel. I moved to Denver 3 weeks later, got a job at a regular hotel, one built in 1997, with thin walls and no history, and absolutely nothing supernatural. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear it. Piano music, faint and far away, like it's coming from another room. And sometimes my phone rings at 3:47 a.m. When I answer, there's only static and breathing and a woman's voice, sad and distant. "He's still in the walls, Marcus." I looked into the hotel's history after I left, really dug into it. Police records, old newspapers, death certificates. There never was a Thomas Grayson. No guest by that name in 1924. No record of anyone going missing from the hotel that year. But I found something else. In 1924, there was a fire in the basement, small, contained, officially blamed on faulty wiring. The hotel hired contractors to repair the damage. They sealed off an entire section of the basement, said it was structurally unsound. One of those contractors never went home. His name was Thomas Grayson. His wife filed a missing persons report. Police investigated, found nothing. The case went cold. The hotel's expansion was completed 6 months later. And if you go to the Stanley Hotel today and you're friendly with the maintenance staff and you ask the right questions, they'll tell you. Sometimes, late at night, they hear scratching in the walls, in Section D, behind the old laundry room, where they sealed up the burned part of the basement in 1924. And if you're very quiet and you listen very carefully, you can hear him, still scratching, still trying to get out, after 73 years. My resignation letter is still on that front desk, still unsigned, the pen still lying across it. I wonder sometimes if they've hired a new night auditor, if some other kid, desperate for money, took the job. I wonder if they told him about the 4th floor, about the basement, about what happens at 3:47 a.m. I hope they did, but I don't think they will. The Stanley Hotel keeps its secrets, and it always needs someone on the night shift. The record begins with a journey that at the time was registered as routine. In early spring, a senior logistics executive from South Korea traveled to Europe with his spouse, documenting the trip as a combination of scheduled meetings and personal leave. Germany was one of several destinations. The country was already familiar to him through years of supply chain negotiations, factory inspections, and regulatory briefings. There was no indication that this visit would differ from any of his previous business trips. On the morning of Thursday, April 14th, 1994, at approximately 10:40 a.m., Han Jun-sok and his wife, Lee Eun-hae, were walking together along Rosenstrasse, a commercial street near the edge of Berlin's Mitte district. The area connected office buildings, cafes, and small retail shops, and was known for steady pedestrian movement throughout the workday. At that hour, the street was active but unremarkable. Nothing about the surroundings suggested danger or disorder. Han's professional work involved international freight contracts and port management. His company specialized in long-term shipping agreements between East Asia and Europe, with annual revenues reported at just under 18 million Deutsche Marks. His role required frequent travel between Seoul, Hamburg, and Rotterdam. According to company records, his position had expanded rapidly over the previous 5 years. This particular trip, however, had not been scheduled exclusively around corporate meetings. Internal calendars described it as partially recreational. The couple had extended their stay by several days beyond the conclusion of Han's formal obligations. After walking for several minutes, they began looking for a place to eat and turned back toward the area where their rental vehicle was parked. As they approached a crosswalk, a dark-colored sedan slowed and stopped near the curb directly in front of them. 2 individuals inside the vehicle lowered the windows and spoke briefly. The exchange lasted only moments. Due to a language barrier, Lee Eun-hae appeared uncertain about what was being said. Before either of them could step back, one of the occupants raised an object later identified as a handgun. A single shot was fired. Han Jun-sok was struck in the lower abdomen. His wife collapsed immediately. During the same encounter, a leather shoulder bag containing cash and documents was taken. The vehicle departed without hesitation. There was no prolonged confrontation. The entire incident unfolded in seconds. Emergency services arrived within minutes. Both victims were transported to a nearby hospital. Han's injury was severe but treatable. Lee Eun-hae, however, had sustained critical head trauma. Imaging revealed extensive neurological damage. She did not regain consciousness. Mechanical ventilation and full life support were required to maintain vital functions. During initial questioning, Han described the shooter as a man in his 20s wearing sunglasses with shoulder-length hair. He stated that the speed of the incident prevented him from observing the vehicle's license plate or identifying other distinguishing features. Investigators canvassed the area. Nearby shop owners reported hearing the gunshot but could not provide consistent descriptions. Surveillance cameras in the vicinity were either malfunctioning or oriented away from the street. At the time, Rosenstrasse had been listed by local police as a moderate-risk area for theft and pickpocketing, though violent incidents were rare. This context complicated early assessments. The absence of physical evidence slowed the investigation almost immediately. While his wife remained hospitalized, Han began speaking publicly. From her bedside, he issued statements condemning street violence and questioning public safety standards for foreign visitors. He sent letters to the German Interior Ministry and to diplomatic representatives urging stronger preventive measures. Interviews aired on South Korean television framed him as a grieving husband caught in an incomprehensible tragedy. Approximately 6 weeks after the shooting, Han was cleared to return to Seoul. Lee Eun-hae remained in Berlin, still dependent on intensive medical care. Media coverage in South Korea intensified. Headlines referred to the incident as the Berlin Street Case. Domestic reporting emphasized the vulnerability of overseas travelers and the perceived failure of foreign law enforcement. Han formally requested compensation from German victim assistance programs, citing medical expenses and long-term care obligations. The requested amount, equivalent to approximately $400,000, was notable but not unprecedented. Eventually, arrangements were made to transport Lee Eun-hae back to South Korea. A chartered medical aircraft was used. Broadcast footage showed her being transferred on a stretcher as Han walked alongside, shielding her face from cameras. The images circulated widely and generated public sympathy. At that point, the case was classified as an unresolved armed robbery resulting in catastrophic injury. No suspects were in custody. 8 months later, Lee Eun-hae died from complications related to the original brain trauma. With her death, public attention began to fade. In Germany, the case remained open but inactive. 2 years passed. In late 1996, a financial journal in Seoul published an investigative series examining irregularities in international insurance claims. One article referenced Han Jun-suk by name. According to the report, Han had taken out multiple high-value insurance policies on his wife in the year preceding the trip. Coverage totaled approximately 9.5 billion won, an amount considered unusually large relative to their reported lifestyle. The policies had been expanded only weeks before departure. After the incident, Han received the full payout. Additional reports stated that he consolidated control over joint assets, closed accounts registered solely under his wife's name, and sold personal property belonging to her estate. Public perception shifted rapidly. Media outlets began referring to Han not as a victim, but as a subject of interest. His remarriage less than a year after his wife's death further fueled speculation. He relocated to Switzerland, renting a luxury apartment near Lake Geneva with a reported monthly cost exceeding 12,000 francs. coverage escalated. Han appeared across thousands of articles. His business suffered. Contracts were terminated. Eventually, his logistics firm dissolved. The attention triggered new institutional responses. In early 1997, a former acquaintance contacted a South Korean newspaper and claimed involvement in a serious crime. The individual alleged that Han had offered substantial payment in exchange for arranging an accident abroad. The account referenced a prior incident in Vienna that had been dismissed at the time as a fall. Authorities reopened multiple cases. What followed was a prolonged legal process spanning continents, jurisdictions, and decades. Trials were held, convictions were issued and later overturned, witnesses recanted, evidence degraded, appeals accumulated. In 2004, Han was acquitted domestically. International warrants remained unresolved. In 2012, while traveling through a European territory with extradition agreements, Han was detained. He challenged the arrest, citing double jeopardy. Courts ruled the charges distinct. Before proceedings could advance, Han was found unresponsive in detention. He was pronounced dead hours later. Surveillance systems were offline for maintenance. Official conclusions cited natural causes. Independent observers questioned the findings. The case ended without a final verdict. Years later, unrelated investigators reviewing cold corporate fraud cases identified financial links connecting Han to an earlier unidentified death in Eastern Europe. The findings were released quietly. No further action followed. The ledger was closed, but never reconciled. In 1958, atop the roof of Higashi High School in Kyoto, a student named Haruto Tanaka confessed his feelings to a classmate, Miyuki Saito. She smiled, shook her head, and walked away. The moment lingered in Haruto's memory, but had no immediate impact on his daily life. Years later, Haruto married Ayaka Fujimoto and moved into apartment 407 in the Kiyomitsu district. They had a daughter, Rina, born in 1972. On April 9, 1986, tragedy struck. Ayaka was found murdered inside their apartment. Rina, aged 14, was present. The perpetrator had fled, and no